Guess who got distracted? Me. I got a little off track from our sandworm scene this past week. I had a lot going on in my personal life. There was a local miniature event that I went to. I have not put in the lights and I have not put in the sand. However, last week I did create a vacuum. Technically, I just started a vacuum in a live stream. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with the sandworm scene? Well, if you're familiar with the first movie, you will know that Barbara mentions she can't get to the vacuum because the vacuum's in the garage. Barbara and Adam are ghosts trapped inside of their house, and the one interior space that they can't get to is the garage. Anytime they go out that door, they end up on Saturn. So it is related, loosely. Kind of makes you wonder why the garage, but I guess they didn't want to put a big garage door in the middle of Saturn. It looks cooler with just the single door. I don't know. So anyway, I started working on this vacuum in the live stream. I will edit in some clips from the live stream for those of you who weren't able to watch it or don't like live streams. And then I'm going to finish the rest of the vacuum in this video. So let's go ahead and get started with that, because ever since I started this vacuum in the live stream, I've just been so excited about seeing how it will turn out. I will put a link to the original live stream down in the description box, and I have also blanked out the face cam from the original live stream, so it's a little less distracting because my words are not going to match my mouth. My typical go-to material is paper. However, this vacuum has such an interesting shaped head. I'm going to call it the vacuum head. I don't know if that's the correct term. I just had to go for clay. I'm using some Sculpey polymer clay for this build. The first thing I did was roll it out in a thin sheet. It's about 3/16 to 1/4 inch thick. And then I cut off a flat edge on the bottom, and I used a circle cutter to try and get the sculptural curved edges on the side. As I'm going, I'm just looking at the general shape of the vacuum and trying to get as close as I can with the clay. Once I had a shape that I liked, I wanted to put in some of the sculptural edges that you see here. So I'm using the back of the circle cutter that isn't as sharp, and I'm just going to press into the clay to give a hint of some design. After I pressed in the edges, I knew I needed a little bit of an angle, so I pushed back on the clay to try and give it that shape. It's not really curved in my reference, but I think it gives it that look of a vacuum. It usually has an angled front. I'm using 2 pony beads to be the wheels, and I'm using a bamboo skewer to be the rod that the wheels are going to sit on. Now it will look like the wheels will turn, but eventually I'm just going to glue them in place, so I'm not worried about making it functional. Once I had the pony beads on the bamboo skewer, I rolled out a sheet of clay that was the same height or thickness that would fit underneath the bamboo skewer and hold the wheels in place. Now the side of the vacuum has a very interesting look. It looks bulky, but it really is a tube. So behind the vacuum there is really just like a small cylinder body that goes behind the head. So I just made a cylinder shape and squished it in place behind the sculptural piece we made earlier and on top of the bamboo skewer. Now I'm going to make the piece that serves as the light that goes over the top of the vacuum. This is one long piece that drapes over the back of the vacuum. This is going to kind of put some of these first pieces that I sculpted in place, kind of connect everything together. And before I bake anything, I wanted to put a few more sculptural lines into the top, as I saw in my reference. Now before I squish anything, because I try to add any more detail, I am going to go ahead and bake these pieces, and I made sure to take the pony beads off first because they are plastic. Now while it's baking, I decided to work on the vacuum bag. I found this piece of fabric that I thought would work really well for it. I made a folded over piece that was about the size I wanted my vacuum bag to be. I'm going to put some quilt batting on the inside so it doesn't look too flat. And then I'm adding some hot glue to the interior fold and pressing down, making sure not to burn my fingers. This is going to give me a sharp crease on one side of the bag. I realized I had a little bit too much quilt batting on the inside, so I chopped off the edges added more hot glue on the opposite side of the bag, and pressed it shut, again protecting my fingers. I completely closed the top of the bag, but then at the bottom I only added glue on the two edges and left an opening so that when I create my pipe that's supposed to go up into the vacuum bag, it is open and able to go inside. Now I need to create a crossbar that holds the bag up, and I decided to use a toothpick for this. I cut it to size, and then I added some glue over the toothpick and made a false flap so it looks like the bag is folded over the top of the toothpick. This went rather quickly, so I still had time to sculpt my handle for the vacuum. I'm again using some polymer clay. I'm using a little bit more than I need, but I'm really squishing it onto the end of a bamboo skewer, and I'm just forcing it into the shape that I think would work for the handle. I used my silicone tool to put just a little decorative ridge in the middle, and by that time my vacuum head had cooled down and I was able to work on it again. I left the bamboo skewer inside of it while it baked, but it's still loose. So what I'm going to do is add more clay to either side of the vacuum head to fill in that shape, and then also make a tighter hold on the bamboo skewer so that it stays in place. Every time I added more clay, I put my pony beads back onto the bamboo skewer just to make sure that everything was still fitting. And it's at this point I realized things were rather lopsided, but I really didn't want to start from the beginning. And in the end, this vacuum's kind of lopsided anyway because of the pipe I'm about to create. All I did for this was roll a snake of clay, and I'm pressing it up against the unbaked clay that I just added to the side of the vacuum head. This was my first attempt, but I do try it again later so that I can get the pipe closer to the back middle of the vacuum head. So this isn't my final one, but I do it the same way the second time I create the pipe. Now I also need to create the handle that's going to connect to the vacuum. For this piece, I am again rolling out a sheet of clay and then cutting it to the shape I see in my reference. I added this to the top of the vacuum head just above the little light canopy, I guess I'll call it, and right behind it is where the handle is going to sit. I don't feel like this piece alone would be secure enough to glue my handle to, so I'm taking a pyramid-like shape and gluing it behind the previous piece. Well, I'm not gluing it, I'm just pressing it to the piece because it's clay, so it sticks fairly well. Now I can use the end of my skewer to make a perfectly sized hole that once everything's baked and hardened, I can glue my handle into. I didn't want my handle to be baked in the oven in the vacuum head, so I cut a separate piece of bamboo skewer to hold its place while everything baked. Here's my second try at the pipe that goes into the vacuum bag. As you can see, it goes over a little further right behind the vacuum handle, and I am cutting against my finger, but I'm being very, very careful that I don't cut into my finger. This is a very soft clay, so I had quite a bit of control. Before baking all of this, I'm going to blend some of these pieces together. I tried my best to get everything smooth, but you will see later on I have some other tricks to get things smooth after everything's baked. I used some liquid polymer clay to glue the bamboo skewer in place once everything baked in the oven. I did have several techniques suggested to me of how to smooth out clay, so I'm thinking about making a video in the future where I test all of these ideas and find my favorite. So right now I'm just double checking everything before it goes into the oven, and what I did not do was add the liquid polymer clay onto the pipe, so later you will see it falls off while it's baking. Now we're going to focus on the cord. The cord is held between two metal hooks on the side of the handle. Those are going to be incredibly difficult to make strong in my small scale, so I decided to use a piece of mat board, and I'm just going to wrap the string around it to look like a wrapped cord. I'm coloring it with an acrylic black marker to try and hide that there is a solid piece of mat board inside of this cord. I used some hot glue to get it started, and I'm just going to wrap it rather messily, kind of like you would when you're done vacuuming and you just really want to be done with that chore and you want to get the cord wrapped up as quickly as possible. I started with hot glue, but as I was going along, every now and then I added some tacky glue to make sure everything would stay nice and tight. I didn't want any of the cord unraveling. For this project, I did use the plug from my Jack's TV kit, and Livestream Era explained it rather well, so I'm going to let her explain it again. So the way this plug works is it's 3 layers, and then the center layer has these 2 little indents, and when you add that layer, you put some of this Christmas wire in those indents, and then it kind of makes what looks like a little plug. Here's how the plug looks once it's all together. I do think this would be very easy to also make with polymer clay. You would just kind of form a small shape and then put the Christmas ornament wire in the end and bake it. So as you can see, the pipe did fall off, but no worries, it held its shape, so it's going to be very easy to glue back on later. And the handle fits well, and I'm also going to have to build out the back of the vacuum. But this is where our live stream had to end, so everything else after this will be me putting all of these individual pieces together. But I was pretty happy with how far I got in a 2-hour live stream. So going forward, everything is going to be new footage that no one has seen before, and let's put this little vacuum together. The first thing I need to do is finish up the clay work so I can be done with that part. I'm going to remove the wheels again. I don't need those for reference because all I'm going to be doing is fixing the back. It's looking not great. It's a little wonky. But thankfully, all it's going to take is a little bit of clay, some liquid polymer clay to make sure that it sticks, and I'm just going to smooth it into my existing sculpture, my existing sculpt that has already been baked. And this is just another little silicone sculpting tool. I am not super patient when it comes to this, and also this front piece broke off. That's because I did not use the liquid polymer clay or blend these pieces into each other, but they are baked, so it will be easy to just glue these pieces together. The liquid polymer clay does act as a glue for polymer clay to polymer clay. It did also seem to hold the barbecue skewer in place, so this stuff works really well even though mine seems to be ancient. I don't know how long I've had it for. I baked it one more time to finish up the last bit of polymer clay work, and then I was ready to sand my sides. I am rather impatient when it comes to sanding, when it comes to blending. So my favorite thing to do is to use lightweight spackling to fill in any gaps and make things a little bit smoother. It does take some time to dry, but I find that it works really, really well. Hopefully it works well with polymer clay. I'm not sure I've ever used it on polymer clay before, but I guess we'll see over the years. Again, I put the wheels back on to make sure everything fit. Now it's time to focus on some of the details. I'm not going to be using polymer clay anymore. Everything is baked and set. Even though I'm not going to be using the Kirby symbol itself, I did want to get that shape onto the front of the vacuum. I'm using some scrap mat board and just tracing out the shape, and then I'm using some flush cutters to cut the shape out because I'm too lazy to go find my craft knife. I'm not quite sure where it's at. I glued that piece onto the front of the vacuum head, and then I could start working on the trim that's going to go around the area that actually sucks in all of the dirt and dust. I'm using a toothpick to add some glue in a thin line, and then I'm using the same cord that I used to be the cord of the vacuum, like the plug, and I'm going around the front face of the vacuum very carefully, a little bit at a time. I'm going to add the same cord to the front curved area that is supposed to be like the little light that shines down on the area where you're vacuuming. I'm letting these pieces dry, and then I can reattach my poor little pipe that fell off while I was trying to bake this piece. I'm just going to add some tacky glue to anywhere the two pieces are going to touch, and thankfully it's a perfect fit. The next thing I need to do is glue in the handle. Now I was aware starting out that the handle was a little bit too tall. I'd rather it be too tall than too short. So I asked the ghost with the most himself to help me model and make sure that it looked correct next to a human figure. I cut it down to the size that I thought looked accurate, and once I checked it one more time, I was able to finally glue it into place into the hole that I created in the clay, and I feel like it's going to be a very strong connection. The reason I'm gluing all of this together first is that I want to do a layer of wood glue. Now I know this is a tacky glue container, but I have put wood glue in here. The thing that wood glue does that I love is it kind of creates this like shell that is self-leveling, and it's really great at making something look like it has a metal surface or a metal texture, because I'm still going to have to paint it. But it's going to make all of the different materials like the string, the clay, the mat board, everything that I've used individually look like all one sculpted piece of metal. So I first laid it on with my glue bottle, and then I used a paintbrush to even it out and make sure it gets over every single surface. Once the vacuum head had dried to the touch, it's not completely dry, but I can pick it up and not leave a finger mark. I did the same exact process to the handle. And now the connection between the handle and the vacuum head is going to be very strong because everything has glue on the inside and on the outside. So everything is completely glued. Now it's time for the really fun part of painting everything. I feel like this is when everything starts to come together. You start to see the final vision of the piece. I'm using a base coat of gray because I do want this to be a silver metallic look to the vacuum head and the handle. I'm going to do gray over the entire thing, and then once that dries, I'm going to add a silver on top of it. It's not a very high quality silver paint, but as long as I have a base coat of gray, it should work really well. And at first, I didn't like the brush strokes that was being left in the silver, but if I looked at my reference, the outside of the vacuum is almost always really scuffed up, and so I think in the end, it actually adds to the look of the vacuum. I'm using a very thin detail brush and some brown paint to start to paint over the details. All of the references I looked at for these types of vacuum had some kind of color pop on these parts of the machine, and they usually all matched even down to the vacuum bag. Now the only piece that I don't really have matching is the wheels, but I feel like the vacuum bag is brown and black, so I feel like having the brown trim and the black wheels will work with the vacuum bag once everything is all put together. I can now permanently glue my wheels on because the paint job is complete. Well, I say it's complete, but I do think we need a little bit of dirt and grime, because unless you have a vacuum to clean your vacuum, like a smaller vacuum to clean your vacuum, usually vacuums are a little bit grimy, especially ones that live in the garage. I'm using some watered down acrylic paint to try to get into all of those little crevices of details that we created during the original sculpting process. And once that's done, I can move on to adding the vacuum bag. I don't know why, but I'm so excited about this part. I think it's what actually makes it a vacuum, because otherwise it's just sucking up dust and blowing it all over your house. I dry fit the bag first on the pipe, and then I realized I needed something to rest the bag against. So I glued a little circle of thread around the handle, and it's going to help me make the bag just a tiny bit slouchy. In all of the references I saw, the bag needed to slouch a little bit. I added some glue in the bottom hole of the vacuum bag, and then I added glue at the top where I knew it was going to touch the handle. And then I could push it underneath the circle of thread that I created. It almost gave me a ledge to help me make sure that I'm holding everything in place. I'm going to hold on to this piece until the glue takes hold to make sure nothing shifts. Now I can add the wrapped up cord that I created during the live stream. I added an extra circle of thread around the handle to help even out where I was gluing this piece, because I realized I could no longer glue it up against the vacuum handle. I'm adding tacky glue anywhere these pieces are going to touch my vacuum, and then I can glue the wrapped up piece in place. I'm really thankful it does touch the front of the vacuum bag. I feel like it gives me a little bit more assurance that it's going to stay in place. One of the final details for this vacuum is going to be the plug I made during the live stream. I glued it to the very tip of a toothpick because it is so tiny, and I'm going to use a small detail brush to paint it the same color that I've been painting the other details that have been added to the vacuum. Once it's dry, I can just break it off of the end of the toothpick and then glue it to the very end of the cord. And I think this little detail, I just love this where the plug is hanging down at the front. You get the little glint of the metal prongs, and as someone said in the live stream, vacuum prongs are always just a little bit bent, so I think it works really well. Once the glue had dried enough to hold the plug to the cord, I'm going to use some Mod Podge to completely cover it to help make sure that it will never be coming off. I'm also going to add Mod Podge to any of the brown areas because usually this is a type of plastic or rubber, and I want it to shine just a little bit to stand out from the gray metal. My Mod Podge is still drying here, as you can see on the plug, but overall the vacuum is finished. I have it next to my reference and I'm so happy with it. Thank you so much for joining me in the live stream and giving me some ideas for it. And thank you for watching me finish it up. We have a few more things to do in this video, and I will show you the vacuum in the garage at the end, so stay tuned. The vacuum is complete. I am loving it. It is really reminding me of a Kirby vacuum, even though it doesn't have any of the insignia on it. It has the look. It's not completely symmetrical, and that is okay. I'm still happy with my clay work. I know there are some clay artists out there who could get it looking perfect. I'm just not as familiar working with clay. It's just not my first material that I go to. So I'm pretty happy with how it came out, even if there are some things that I probably could have fixed along the way. So as I was working on this vacuum, I remembered there are some other garage focused miniatures that I have not finished. I haven't worked on them. And I finished the first floor, and I've just kind of been ignoring the garage. So if you remember back somewhere along the videos in my planning, I decided that the garage is going to be a place where I put extra little diorama houses that were sent to me for the diorama in the attic, because I'm going to have more than I need. And in my mind, I'm thinking that the garage is going to be another space that Delia doesn't care about, that Charles cares about more, and wants to leave it how it is. So this space is going to be pretty much how Adam and Barbara left it when they died. It's going to have some of the houses that Adam was working on, and it's going to have some tools that are kind of scattered around the room. And the vacuum. So let's go ahead and get these other garage miniatures sorted out. So when the time comes to place in the little diorama houses, I have everything ready to go. In the next few clips, you may be wondering, Ava, where are you crafting? What work surface are we on? This is my desk. This is my normal worktop desk. And usually it's not a problem, but because every single section of the base is now filled with a scene, I'm constantly trying to not put my knee through something while I'm trying to work on the top here. So this is like one of those little hospital tables that can go underneath the bed. It's been very handy. It has wheels, you can move it around. I've crafted on it before, as you can probably see. So this is the surface I'm going to be working on as I'm working on the little tiny garage items. This first set of items was sent to me quite a long time ago by Beverly of Walker Way Weeds, and they are all items specifically sent for the garage. There is a set of sawhorses, a piece to go on top of the sawhorses, a scroll saw, and a drill. All things that I think Adam would really want as he's building his attic diorama and all the mini houses that need to go inside of it. But the first thing we need to do is age up this table because it is going to be well used. And right now it's looking a little too pristine. I'm going to be using all sorts of watered down acrylics. This includes brown acrylic, black acrylic, and later I'll be using some green. And yes, this is Jazz's face on the cutting mat. It's a small one I got in one of his craft boxes. Someone mentioned it in the last video, and it's just really handy to have on my work table. Everything that I'm doing to the piece of plywood that sits on top of the sawhorses, I'm also doing to the sawhorses below. And while everything is wet, it has like that first layer of brown acrylic paint, I am adding the black acrylic paint so it kind of spreads out and really holds on to those wood grains that you can see. It looks like a spill that's kind of spread out over the top. I didn't really like all of the spots, so I dragged my brush through everything and kind of blended it together here and there. I don't want anything to look too symmetrical. Because I'm sure Adam used a lot of paints and stains, I'm going to be using a couple different size circles. This is a Sharpie pin cap lid, and I'm just going to put that into the acrylic paint and stamp it onto the top of the plywood piece. And this is still while the plywood piece is wet, so it's again going to spread out a little bit and really blend into the table. I'm going to do this with brown and green and really just put several circles all over the place. I wanted to add some bigger ones, so I'm using an Elmer's glue cap to do the same exact thing, except I put fewer of the larger circles. And then I'm using a toothpick to make some faux drips, as if he had put his brush into the pot and it had dripped across the work surface that he was using. While that's drying, I want to add a few more details to the scroll saw. Not that many, but I wanted to just add some pieces along the top, and then I wanted to add a couple buttons along the front that look like an on and off button. These little details, kind of like the vacuum, I'm not really sure how much of this you can actually see by just looking into the garage, but I feel like those who really want to take the time to look, I want to make sure that they see a ton of detail. The pieces that I'm adding to create the buttons are just little nail charms that are flat on one side. I'm going to paint one of them red, one of them green to look like on and off buttons. And then on the top, I'm just painting them black so they look like some kind of rivet, something that's holding all the pieces in place. And then of course, I need to age up this machine because I imagine it was used a lot. Whatever was used to finish this piece is really paint repellent, but in the end, I am happy with the look that I got by dry brushing some brown paint along the bottom and leaving a bit of black that splattered across the front. I did add a little bit of brown there just to give it some variety. And then of course, I'm just going to do some watered down black and brown paint all over the little hand drill. I think this is such a cute detail. And I didn't want these pieces to look wrecked. I didn't want it to look like they were just torn apart or broken. I wanted them to look like they were well used and loved in Adam's projects. So I'm going to set all of these pieces aside and work on some of my other garage miniatures. I made these next items in a class that was taught by Vicky Meeker. She's an incredible miniaturist that comes up with so many fun ideas. These were all foldable boxes. And this one specifically had a light bulb you could make from a pear-shaped clear bead and a little pin spring. And it just looks so realistic with just a few simple items. There's also this paint set that I made during her class, and she really just has some of the most interesting ideas. Like this is a pipe cleaner, and she just shaved off the fuzzy part on one section and bent it to look like a paint roller. I'm not quite sure what she made the little paint roller palettes out of, but you just add some paint and it looks like one of those pieces that people didn't want to clean up and just let kind of crust over and dry out. This is a little car battery that we painted during class, and I think this is for oil. I can't remember how we put it together, but the handle is a staple, which is so fun. I do think the cinder block is one she purchased from a Dollhouse store, but she might have cast it herself. These are little strips of paper that she rolled up to look like painter's tape. I have a couple bags of these, so I'll probably add those in somewhere. This is a fire extinguisher. It looks like the brand is Classics, and we were supposed to paint that as well. I ran out of time in class, so that's why some of the things are finished and some of them are not. I have these little Dutch Boy paint cans. These actually might have come from Billy Ferguson, but I don't remember they were with this class stuff, so I'm not quite sure. But if they were from you, Billy, thank you. I have this little flashlight that was made out of the end cap that came off of like a diabetic syringe, and then you just add a bead to the end and a little piece for the switch. And this little green wire that we wrapped up is a garden hose, and it just has a couple beads on the end. And some of these I've already aged, some of them I have not. This is a little toolbox. I aged the outside of it, but I do want to put a few tools on the inside. She did give us quite a few tool charms, and I have those ready to go. So I'm putting things to the side here that I know I need to work on. I have another one of these pieces that's supposed to look like an extension cord, and then I have a few pieces to make a bunch of paint cans to go in the garage. So now that you've seen everything that I have, I'm going to start working on the fire extinguisher. I'm just going to make it look a bit more realistic. I think this one is cast and then just painted all in one piece. So it's just completely red, which doesn't look very realistic. So I'm going to paint the funnel. Is it a funnel? I'm guessing black, and then I was going to paint the handle black too, but it ended up looking kind of like a duck's head. So I'm going to go with my reference and just paint that entire handle piece that you squeeze to make everything come out of the fire extinguisher. I'm going to paint that silver, just like I saw in my reference. And then of course I'm going to age it to make it look like it has been sitting in the garage for quite a while. I'm going to let that sit to the side and dry. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the cinder block. I'm using some very watered down black paint, adding it to the side and then kind of swooshing it down the side with my finger. This is a very absorbent material. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's soaking in the paint really fast. So I'm trying to move quickly. If I let something sit there for too long, it will look like a brush stroke, I think. Inside the toolbox, I'm adding quite a bit of wood glue, and then I'm going to add a few of the little tool charms that were given to us during the class, and I'm going to close up the toolbox and glue it shut, and then age the tools that are sticking out of the side. I only put a couple in there. Now we can move on to the paint cans. Vicky said these little containers were containers that kind of came in your medication. So you know, like the silica gel that comes in a packet? Well, these have like a mesh on the top and bottom, and there would be some kind of gel or something, probably like some kind of solid material on the inside that would keep the medication from getting any moisture. So that's what these paint cans are. And she printed out labels so they fit perfectly on the paint cans, and you can actually take the top of the paint can off. I have one that doesn't have the top for it anymore, so I'm going to make it look like this paint can was left open, so you can see a little bit of the red paint on the inside, and it's kind of spilling out the sides. And I'm going to put this one to the side to dry. For the green one, I'm going to make it look like it has been used, and I'm just adding some green paint to the edge and having it flow down the side. I didn't want to get up and go get my blue paint, so all I'm doing for the blue paint can is making some rust around the edges, like this one's never been open. The last one I'm going to make from this small set of class projects is the one that looks like an extension cord. It's another piece of wire that's been cut down, and then you're supposed to glue beads to the end of it to look like the plugs on the end of the extension cord. And you actually can see an extension cord in the background of Adam's garage, and it is hanging from the rafters. So I'm bending this one so it can hang down from the shelves inside my garage as well. Here's how it looks. The little bead is taking a while to take hold with the glue, but I think it will work in the end. I just have to kind of hold it. The class also came with a stack of newspapers that you could tie together and kind of make just like a stack of newspapers. But I'm not gluing anything down yet. I don't know if I want to put a stack of newspapers or just have them kind of stuffed here and there behind some of the little houses or behind some of the tools. So right now I'm just cutting them down to size, and I'm going to fold them and just put them with my materials. So when I actually start gluing things in place, they're ready to go. So after all of that work, all of that aging to finalize the items that I had in the class and that were gifted to me for this space, here is my collection of garage items. previously, the only miniature that was permanently going to be in the garage is the chair for Adam's desk, so I'm excited to add some miniatures that are specifically for this space. And over here to the right, I have two little newspaper clippings that have been framed by tiny keyhole minis. Jolene created the newspapers and framed them and sent them to me, and I think they're going to work really well in the garage. And of course, we can't forget the vacuum. So let's take all of these items and put them in their rightful place. I went ahead and took the whole top of the roof off because it's going to be so much easier to move things around and figure out what I want without fighting the very low ceiling in this space. I finally decided I wanted to put the vacuum on the left side, and this wall is the only wall that has space for these newspaper frames. So I'm going to put these in with masking tape. I'm putting them in temporarily because I may also want them in the attic. I haven't fully decided yet. So I'm going to add them in here on either side of the vacuum, and I think it's kind of a fun little like the Maitlands were here type of moment. Now I can add all of my garage pieces into their space. I'm not going to be able to completely pack the shelves, but that is good because I'm going to have some extra diorama houses that are going to need to sit on that center table along the shelves and really make it look like Adam was actively working on these pieces in his garage workshop. However, I feel like if I didn't have this many garage themed items in this space, it might be a little confusing as to what it is. Now, of course, I have to hang my extension cord, and because I made the shelves out of balsa wood, I can just take a sewing pin and push it straight into the side. And I think it hanging down is a great little detail. So here's the final look at the garage and the home of the vacuum that started this entire episode. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I am thrilled to bits over all these little pieces that can go here and there in the garage. I think they're really going to give that lived-in feel that you oftentimes get with a garage that you inherit from someone else, essentially. Thank you for your patience on the sandworm scene. I do not have any more events that are taking me out. Oh wait, actually I do. I was about to say I don't have any more events that are taking me out of town, but the weekend of October 18th, I am going to the Mini Time Machine Museum of Miniatures in Tucson, Arizona. I'll be teaching a class there. I will leave a link in the description box below if it's something you're interested in. So I will be going out of town, but the sandworm scene will be finished before then, I promise, because that will be my sole focus right after this video goes up. I hope you enjoyed this little side project I decided to work on in the middle of the Saturn scene. In my head, they're related and it makes sense. You'll have to let me know if it makes sense to you. But I had so much fun with the vacuum. And sometimes it's just really like refreshing to buckle down and just focus on one thing, trying to get in as much detail as possible, even if it's not an entire room. Just like focusing on one singular miniature and pushing the limits of your abilities. That's how I felt, and I really had fun with it. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Are you gonna help? Do you hear the acorns? Yeah. There's acorns falling on the roof right now. You ready to work? Let's get some miniatures done. Those are some big acorns. Do you hear them? Can you get them? Gotta go get those squirrels. Tell them, stop it.